Hey everyone, Alan here. Welcome back to The Guitar Doctor is In for episode number 9, where we're going to enhance your 2-5-1-6 progression using pentatonics.
You serious, Clark?
That's right, pentatonics. Let's get started. Okay, so how do we use pentatonic scales to enhance chords? Well, one, we're going to use what I refer to as pentatonic voicings. And all of these voicings are going to come straight out of those 5 pentatonic boxes, like box 1, box 2, so on and so forth, that you already know to cover the neck of the guitar. But what we're going to do is we're going to put them in voicings to replace our standard drop 2s and drop 3 type voicings that we would normally use to play our chord progressions possibly. And this will give us a more modern sound because the interval ranges and the way that the notes are stacked are going to create some interesting and ambiguous sounds. The other thing that we're going to do with these is we are going to substitute pentatonics for the original chord. And what I mean by that is instead of using D minor pentatonic with D minor 7, I'm going to use a substitute pentatonic. And you may have seen this in the previous videos that I've done, but to do so for that minor 2 chord, I'm simply going to go up a perfect fifth to the note A, and that's going to be my pentatonic scale that I'm going to use over top of that. So let me give you the substitutions first, and then I'm going to go into how we're going to voice these pentatonic scales. For the 2 chord, what we're going to do, like I said, is we're going to go up a perfect fifth from our root. In this case, I'm using D minor 7. Go up a perfect fifth, and I have A, and that will give me the minor pentatonic as a substitute. So A minor 7 will substitute for my 2 chord. The progression I'm going to play is going to be in the key of C, so I'm going to play D minor 7, G7 altered, C major 7, A7 altered to get me back to my 2 chord. So, for the G7 altered, the pentatonic substitution is going to be derived from a minor third from the root. In this case, B flat is a minor third from G, and I'll use B flat minor pentatonic to achieve my voicings. For C major 7, I've actually got 2 options I'm going to use. I can either use a third away from the root. In this case, that would be E minor pentatonic. And that would give me the 9th of my C major 7 chord. Or I can play from the 7th degree, B, and play B minor pentatonic, and that will give me a Lydian sound. Then for the A7 chord, I'll treat it just like I did G7, therefore it's an altered chord, and I just go up a minor third, and I have C minor 7 pentatonic to achieve my voicings. Now what's really nice about this is if I choose the sharp 11 option, notice that all of my pentatonic scales move up chromatically. This is going to be great because once I create a voicing, I can move it in a constant structure. What I mean by a constant structure is that I can move the same shape and voicing up in a half step each time for each chord. So for example, if I were to use this voicing for my D chord, then I would keep the same constant voicing as I go up the fretboard, and that will achieve 2-5-1-6 in that key. So let's talk about how we create these voicings. So what I do is I break it down into string groups. Again, I like using 2 string groups, 3 string groups, and 4 string groups. Once you get to 5 or 6 string groups, it just gets too muddy and it doesn't really enhance the sound. It just really, like I said, muddies the sound up. So most of the time I'm going to stay to the upper strings, and I'm not going to go too far below. I may go down as far as the 5th string, but most everything's going to be the upper 4 strings for a lot of the voicings that I particularly like, so it doesn't interfere with the bass range. And like I said, just kind of disguise the chord or muddy it up to where you can't distinguish what the chord really is. So when I look at a 2-string group, in order to drive my voicings from this, if I were going to take A minor pentatonic, and let's say I look at the top 2 strings, I'm going to look for all the permutations that I can use based off of the notes on those two strings. And it's real simple, and this is going to sound almost silly, but the way I look at it is, since I have two notes on a string, I have a bottom note and a top note. And with that, I just simply name them bottoms and tops. Maybe you name them lower and upper, whatever works for you, but it's a simple process in order to use it to learn the fretboard and to learn these voicings, and it's real simple for me to teach these to students by using that type of nomenclature, so that's why I do that. But if I were to look at these two strings, then the combinations I have available to me is two bottom notes or two top notes, or maybe I have a top and a bottom note or a bottom and a top note. And that stays consistent across the shape. So all I'm doing in this shape is I'm combining the notes that are derived from that pentatonic box. Tops, bottoms, top, bottom, top, and so on and so forth. I could do that all the way down to see all my combinations possible. And by doing so, you'll notice for each string group, I basically get 4 options when I'm using 2 strings. So then I can do the same kind of thing with 3 strings, which means I can have 3 bottoms, 3 tops. I can have a bottom, bottom, top. I can have a top, top, bottom. I can have bottom, top, bottom. I can have top, bottom, top. You know, you say it enough times, it sounds kind of silly, but at the same time, it is an effective tool. When you do that, I believe with the 3, I think you get something like 12 permutations. And then if you move on to 4, you get like 16 permutations of the possible options of combinations of strings. So I'll let you explore those, and I have included a PDF that captures those. But I want to get right into the sounds of these. So if I'm going to use A minor over top of the D, so my D minor 7, my 2 chord, I kind of like to steer towards opposites of like things like top, bottom, top voicings, as opposed to doing like bottom, bottom, top. Because when I do this, you should notice like I'm getting an octave, but I'm also getting this perfect fifth. So it's really a power chord. So that's a C5, you know, and if I keep doing that, I'm really getting power chords. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because that means we already play those type of voicings. However, they're not very colorful, so I kind of steer away from those. The others I kind of avoid are top, top, bottom. It's not that they're bad. Some of them's useful. These upper ones are a little more useful, and depending on the pentatonic box you're coming out of, you can get some creative sounds. But they're not as colorful as alternating the 2 notes. So I like to alternate them, and that's what I'm going to do in this particular example. In this particular example, now I'm looking at a top note, a bottom note, and another top note, using a 3-string group. If I do that, over top of D, you can hear the color that it produces. So it's really interesting colors. It sounds very ambiguous because the 3rd of the chord is not there to define it as that minor 7. So that's one nice thing, because I'm getting the 9th in there, but the 3rd is never there and never present because I'm using that particular substitution of a pentatonic scale over that chord. Plus the intervals seem a little bit wider. There are actual names for some of these chords. For example, like this is an A minor 7 with no 5th. But for me, I like thinking about them as pentatonic voices because they come out of those shapes. So let's listen to B flat minor pentatonic over top of the G7. So in this case, why don't we use bottom, top, bottom. Really cool sound. Now the interesting thing about using a B flat minor pentatonic scale over top of the G, or any dominant chord, if we use that configuration of minor 3rd away, is that it does not contain the 3rd of the chord or the root of the chord. So that's why it sounds 100% ambiguous, because it's got all of the altered tones, flat 9, sharp 9, flat 5, sharp 5, and it does include the flat 7. But it gives a lot of different colors that are present in the altered dominant chord without giving you the 3rd of the chord. So again, that ambiguity that's being created by using these pentatonic voices is very present in the altered dominant chords. Let's listen to C major 7. Let's say I use E minor. I could use, like I said, I could use B minor pentatonic. There's that sharp 11 in there with the F sharp. And then it's kind of back down to some shared notes that's with the E minor until I get back down to the one off the 5th string that's got the sharp 11 with F sharp there at the 9th fret. So those are just some of the basic colors that you can get from using these pentatonics. If I were to go on and do the example for A minor, you would get the same colors and the same shades that you got with the G, just transposed up a whole step. So now I can have, like I said, if I wanted constant structure, I could have my 2, 5, 1, 5 of 2. And I could have done that with like any voicing. Like one of my favorites is if I do all bottoms here in the middle, which we see as a C major triad. But if I put that over top of those bass notes, get some really cool sounds with that. So these pentatonic voices are very effective for creating a modern type sound. So what I'm going to do now to close this out, this was a short little episode, but to close this out, I'm going to play over top of this progression. In another way I'm going to enhance, making it a little more modern or contemporary, is that first of all, I've placed this with a groove that's in 7. The bass is kind of disjunct. There's a little pad going on in the background, but once you put these chords in, you're going to see where it sounds very modern and represents guitarists maybe like Frank Gambale or Scott Henderson or Brett Garsed, fusion guitarists like that would use similar type situations in order to get a more modern and ambiguous kind of color. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you like the information that you're getting on this channel, please subscribe and like, and then hit the little bell icon so that you can get notifications every time I release a new video. If you want more information about chordal voicings and everything else, check out my book, The Harmonic Expansion Process, where I teach you how to build your traditional drop 2s and drop 3 chords using pentatonics and power chords. And it will lead into pentatonic voicings just like I did here today in episode 9. So until next time, now go practice.